Rain poured down in relentless sheets, drumming against rooftops, umbrellas, and the few lonely souls still wandering the streets of the city. Among them was Ethan, his jacket soaked through, his hands trembling from the cold as he stood beneath a flickering streetlight. The night had been cruel to him, his wallet gone, his phone dead, and the last bus long departed. He had no choice but to walk. He wasn't always like this, desperate, alone, invisible to the world around him. Just a few months ago, Ethan had been a university student with plans, friends, and a future that seemed secure. But when his father died suddenly, the fragile stability of his life crumbled. Bills piled up, his grades slipped, and eventually, his scholarship was revoked. He left school, took odd jobs, and moved into a cheap shared flat, but fate seemed intent on testing how much one soul could endure. Now, on this freezing night, he trudged along the dimly lit road, his shoes squelching with every step. The city didn't pause for anyone's pain, cars sped by, throwing waves of muddy water across his path, and people averted their gaze when he passed. The world had its own rhythm, and it had no place for broken stories like his. When he reached the edge of a small underpass, Ethan spotted something, a faint glow from a vending machine that buzzed softly in the dark. He searched his pockets, but all he had were a few coins, not enough for even a bottle of water. His stomach growled, and he leaned against the wall, staring blankly at the machine's light as if it might offer warmth. Long night? The voice startled him. He turned to see a woman standing a few steps away, holding an umbrella that dripped water onto the pavement. She looked to be in her late 30s, with kind eyes that didn't flinch when they met his. Her clothes were neat but simple, a long gray coat, a scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. "Yeah," Ethan muttered, rubbing his hands together. "Just trying to get home." She glanced at his soaked jacket and then at the vending machine. "You look like you could use something warm." Ethan shrugged, embarrassed. "I'll be fine. Just need to keep moving." But before he could turn away, she was already inserting coins into the machine. She pressed a button, waited for the click, and pulled out a can of hot coffee. Steam rose as she handed it to him. "Here," she said softly. "It's not much, but it helps." For a moment, Ethan hesitated. People didn't just hand out kindness like that anymore, not in this city. Yet there was something sincere in her eyes, something that reminded him of home. He accepted the can, its heat seeping into his frozen fingers. "Thank you," he said, his voice almost breaking. She smiled. "Don't mention it. I've had nights like this too." They stood there under the dim light, sipping coffee as the rain softened into a drizzle. Her name was Clara, he learned, and she worked at a nearby hospital. She was heading home after a long shift but had missed her own bus when she stopped to help an elderly man who'd slipped on the sidewalk. "Sometimes," she said, gazing into the distance, "it feels like everything's just too much. The city, the noise, the loneliness. But then someone does something small, holds a door open, offers a smile, helps a stranger, and suddenly it feels like maybe there's still a spark of humanity left." Ethan nodded slowly. "I used to believe that," he murmured. "Not sure I do anymore." Clara looked at him quietly for a moment. "Then maybe you just haven't seen it in a while." They parted soon after. She offered him her umbrella, but he refused, thanking her again before disappearing into the misty night. She watched him go, her heart heavy, hoping that tiny act might have meant something. For Ethan, it meant more than he could express. The warmth of that coffee, the genuine kindness in her tone, it cut through the fog of despair that had settled over him for months. It wasn't the coffee that mattered, it was the reminder that he wasn't invisible. That somewhere, amid the chaos, someone still cared. The next day, Ethan found a temporary job unloading goods at a local store. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a few meals and keep his hope alive. Each day, as he passed the same vending machine, he thought of Clara. That small moment had sparked something in him, not just gratitude, but a desire to do the same for someone else one day. Weeks passed. Life didn't transform overnight, but it began to shift. Ethan saved what little he could, started fixing his resume, and applied for entry-level jobs at the university library. He still struggled, but he had direction again. Then, one evening as he was leaving work, he spotted an older man standing outside in the cold. His coat was threadbare, his hands trembling as he fumbled with a few coins in front of a convenience store. Ethan recognized the look, the mixture of exhaustion and quiet defeat. He approached cautiously. "Hey, sir, you okay?" The man sighed. "Just, trying to buy something to eat. Guess I miscounted." Ethan didn't hesitate. He reached into his pocket and handed the man a few bills. "Here. Get something warm." The man blinked, startled. "Are you sure? You don't even know me." Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, but someone once did the same for me. Guess it's my turn now." That small act stayed with him, not because it was grand, but because it reminded him how kindness could travel from one soul to another, unseen yet powerful. Like a spark catching dry wood, it spread quietly, lighting lives in ways no one could predict. Months later, Ethan was working part-time at the library and taking night classes again. His life was far from perfect, but he felt grounded, renewed. He often thought about Clara and how a 5-minute conversation on a rainy night had changed everything. Then, one winter evening, as snowflakes began to fall, Ethan saw a familiar figure sitting alone on a hospital bench. It was Clara, her posture weary, her face pale under the harsh light. He approached gently. "Clara," he said. She looked up, startled at first, then smiled in recognition. "Ethan? I can't believe it's you." He sat beside her. "I never got the chance to thank you properly. That night, it really meant something." She chuckled softly, though her eyes looked tired. "I'm glad. I needed that reminder myself lately." "What's wrong?" Ethan asked. She hesitated, then sighed. "My mother's been in intensive care for weeks. I've been here every day after my shifts. Sometimes I just sit out here, trying to remind myself that it's going to be okay." Without thinking, Ethan reached into his bag and pulled out 2 cups of hot coffee he'd bought earlier. He handed one to her with a small grin. "Then maybe it's my turn now." Clara's eyes softened, and she laughed quietly, accepting the cup. "Full circle," she murmured. "You never know how far one act can go." They sat together in the quiet, watching snow drift under the hospital lights. Days turned into weeks. Clara's mother eventually recovered, and when she was discharged, Ethan was there to help carry her things to the car. Over time, they became friends, unlikely ones, bound not by circumstance but by the quiet understanding that kindness was the only thing that truly healed. Years passed. Ethan completed his degree, got a stable job at a community center, and began organizing small drives for underprivileged students. Every winter, he made it a ritual to hand out hot drinks near that same vending machine where he'd met Clara years ago. He never told people why he did it. It wasn't for recognition or praise. It was because he had learned that even the smallest spark, one act, one word, one moment, could ignite hope in someone who thought the world had forgotten them. One evening, a young girl named Maya came by the community center. She was shy, with a worn backpack and hesitant eyes. She told Ethan she'd been skipping school to work part-time jobs because her family couldn't afford her fees. Ethan listened carefully, then smiled in the way Clara once had. "How about we fix that," he said, and helped her apply for a local scholarship fund. When she left that day, she turned back and said, "Thank you. I didn't think anyone cared." Ethan felt his chest tighten, the same warmth, the same spark. It was alive, still burning quietly after all those years. As he locked up that night, he walked past the old vending machine again. The streetlights still flickered, the machine still hummed, and the air still carried the soft hum of the city. He thought of Clara, now married, working abroad, still sending messages every Christmas, and of all the faces that had come and gone since that night. He smiled, knowing that the spark she had passed to him had never gone out. It had become something more, a light shared from hand to hand, heart to heart, across strangers and friends alike. Somewhere, another lost soul might be standing in the cold tonight, waiting for a sign that the world hadn't turned completely unkind. And maybe, just maybe, someone would offer them a coffee, a word, or even just a smile, and that would be enough to start it all over again. Because kindness, Ethan realized, didn't fade. It echoed quietly, passed from one life to another, a thread of humanity stitching the world back together one act at a time. And though it might start as a spark, small, fleeting, fragile, it was enough to light even the darkest night. And that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all.